Good morning. Welcome to the Law Show. I'm Mike McLeod, and I'll be with you for this segment of the show this morning, brought to you by the law firm Kerrigan, Estes, Rankin, McLeod, and Thompson. Our firm, for many years, has represented seriously injured people across Northwest Florida, and we've hosted the Law Show for almost that many years, taking your calls and comments about our specific area of practice, which is representing seriously injured people. We are also board certified trial lawyers. To be board certified in Florida requires trying a lot of cases, getting recommendations from other lawyers and judges, and passing a very specific test just in this field of law. So you can also, this morning, email us. I can be emailed at my email address, which is mike.mcleod@kerrigan.com, or you can text us with your questions or comments at our main phone number, the easiest number in Florida, 850-444-4444. Text us if you have a comment or question, and we try to answer those, particularly if the question we think will benefit other viewers of the show. So we know from our text that we get a lot of viewers from South Alabama who watch the Law Show. And so this morning, for this segment of the show, we're lucky to have a friend and colleague, Greg Carden, with us this morning. Greg, we're going to put your picture on the screen. Greg is the lead investigator for what I think is the most preeminent personal injury law firm in Alabama, Marsh, Rickard Bryan. Their lawyers have a tremendous track record of success in significant cases, and Greg has played an integral part in a lot of their success. Greg, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, and Greg's on the road. Greg, a lot of investigators who are successful spend a lot of time on the road doing a lot of different things. So I want to get into some of the things a full-time investigator for a real successful law firm does. I think it's really interesting work. So let me introduce you first. We met for the first time. You and I were talking about it before the show aired. 30 years we've known each other, and you worked for our firm, Kerrigan, Estes, Rankin, McLeod, and Thompson, for 5 years, and I taught you everything you know about baseball, I think.
That is true. That is true. In fact, I think we met, I was fresh out of high school, not long out of high school.
That's right. And we played baseball together for years when you were working for our firm, but you've enjoyed a lot of great success with Marsh, Rickard Bryan in Birmingham and in Alabama. So, Greg, there are some differences in the law in Alabama and Florida in these accidental injury cases. I think the main one is Alabama has what we call contributory negligence, and the basic premise is if the person who's injured, we'll call that the plaintiff, has any degree of fault, him or herself, in causing their own injuries, they don't recover in Alabama. I don't think in practice that's always true, but that's the law in Alabama. If the injured party contributed even a little bit to their own injuries, they can't recover anything at all in their case in Alabama. But the same case in Florida, we have what we call comparative negligence, and that means in Florida we compare the fault of the plaintiff and the defendant, and the plaintiff, the injured person, can still recover for the percentage of fault that the defendant causes. And there's some other differences, Greg, and Alabama and Florida. An example you pointed out to me earlier before we got on the air is the owner of a vehicle who allows somebody else to drive their vehicle has more protection in Alabama than in Florida. In Florida, the owner is almost equally responsible as the person who drives and causes the accident. So there are some differences, But Greg, I think you'll agree with me that the investigation of cases, which you are a real expert in, is similar in both states.
Yes, Mike, very much so. But we do, we do have to deal with the contributory negligence law, so that if your client contributes even as much as 1% to their own injury, they're barred from recovery on a negligence claim.
Right.
It's not a defense to any wantonness claim you might have, which is a much higher bar, as you know.
Yeah. And Greg, as far as the investigation of cases is concerned, it's an important part of presenting a client's case and preserving a client's case. So as an investigator with a significant law firm, what are the things that need to be done by you and people that work with you early in a case to make sure the client's case is presented in the best possible way?
Yeah, the biggest thing, Mike, is to try and get on the case immediately. The sooner the better. Sometimes we don't get the cases until later, and that can sometimes put you at a disadvantage. But the sooner you get the case, the sooner you can document the evidence, preserve whatever evidence needs to be preserved, talk to the witnesses while expressed on their mind. It's just imperative to get started early. And the longer you wait, you're at a bigger disadvantage.
And Greg,
it's just imperative to start early.
Yeah, and do you agree with me that, let's say, we'll talk about witnesses first. It may be important to them what they saw, but it's not as important to a client. And witnesses tend to go about their business. Their recollections fade with time. They have other things to do. So you want to get to the witnesses early as you can.
No question. And what you have to realize is these people are living lives just like you and I do.
Yeah.
And they want to go on about their business, and what they witnessed, while very important to us, may not mean a whole lot to them. They may not even think what they saw is important when they're a piece to a puzzle, and they just don't really want to be bothered sometimes.
Yeah.
And so it's not a priority in their life like it is ours. And so it's important that you get to that person, lock them down in whatever form, whether that's a written statement, a written affidavit, or a recorded statement. We do all of those types of preservation. But that way you can show the witness later on when it comes up, because as you know, these things can drag out for a year, 2 years, sometimes longer.
Great point.
And
great point.
Recollections fade, and when you can put a document in front of them and say, this is what you told me when we met 2 years ago. Now that case is ready for trial or something. You're ready to take their deposition. Yeah. They have something they can look back on, and it helps refresh their recollection.
Great point. So even if you get to a witness early and you document what they remember, 2 years later when the case goes to trial, you can refresh their memory about what they saw 2 years later.
Correct, because they're just like we are. They forget things, and then if you put it in front of them, then it kind of comes back to them. Sometimes when I meet with them, whether if it's an automobile accident or whatever type of case, if you show them some photographs, show them the statement that you took from the earlier, 1 or 2 years earlier, then that will refresh their recollection. Things come back to them.
So Greg,
really helps them.
Yeah, and what about, in addition to witnesses and what they see and relate to you, what about collecting and preserving physical evidence in cases? Now, I know from cases that our firm has participated in with your firm, we've had a lot of success together, combining our efforts. Some of those cases involve dangerous products, dangerous tires, but what role does a successful investigator for a law firm play in gathering physical evidence and preserving it?
Well, depending on the type of case, again, going back to, say, an automobile accident, where that's involving just 2 passenger vehicles, or if you're talking about an 18-wheeler case, you have to get to that scene. There's generally skid marks gouge marks. There may be marks on the shoulder of the road, in the median of the road. Obviously, those things go away with time, and so it's imperative to get out there, document that evidence.
Yeah, and Greg, what can those things tell us later? Skid marks, gouges in the road, how do those turn into helpful information?
Well, they generally will point you to the area of the impact, where on the roadway this happened, what happened prior to the impact when you start talking about pre-impact skid marks, yaw marks. It can also tell you what's going on post-impact, where vehicles came to rest. And all of that becomes very important when you start talking about bringing in your experts, accident reconstruction experts, biomechanical experts. All of that stuff is important to their work.
So a lot of our viewers don't know exactly, I think, Greg, how that fits together, but you would get to the scene as soon as possible, photograph a lot of this physical evidence, a gouge on the asphalt or pavement, skid mark, pieces of the vehicle that were not collected after the accident. But then, am I correct? You in many cases get that information to an expert engineer who can piece together the physical evidence and help recreate how the accident happened.
Correct. And almost all the time, I can get to that scene faster than I can get an expert to that scene.
Right. Good point.
So it's important that you get them the information that they're going to need. And also, we haven't talked about this yet, but if it's a car accident, you want to preserve the vehicles that are involved. An accident reconstruction expert's going to have to see all the vehicles involved. That involves trying to secure those vehicles. Generally, that's dealt with on an insurance carrier. If there's insurance involved, usually there is. And you have to preserve those vehicles so that you can get your experts, generally from out of town, not all the time,
right?
But get those experts from out of town in to see those vehicles, to see the scene and any evidence you've been able to collect.
So, Greg, how many junkyards do you think you've been to in your career?
Too many to count.
Right? Hundreds, I bet.
Hundreds, yes. Hundreds.
And you and I were at it's not really a junkyard, it's very well run, but the two vehicles we were looking at here in Florida were perfectly shrink wrapped and preserved, very well protected.
That's correct. And that's how you do it a lot of times. You'll have nice facilities like that. Sometimes, you have trouble getting to the vehicle because it may be sitting in the middle of a mud puddle. But we try to get those vehicles, and a lot of times, like we have a storage facility that we use in Birmingham, where we store our litigation vehicles, which have inspection bays, so that we can bring our experts in town and have them in a good environment to see that vehicle, so they can do all the necessary work to reconstruct an accident.
Hey, Greg, there are all sorts of things we could talk about. We're running out of time. I want to get you back on the show again for another segment. For now, we're out of time. Thank you, Greg, for helping us out this morning. I'm Mike McLeod. I'm with the law firm Kerrigan, Estes, Rankin, McLeod & Thompson. We're proud to host the Law Show each week. Stay tuned.